Good morning, everybody. I'm Adele Kroch and I'm from Food Focus, and it's such a pleasure for me today to have Rika Day with me as well, my partner and colleague within Food Focus. Morning, Bridget.
Hi, Adele. Hi, everybody who's with us today. It's wonderful that you could join us.
Yes, as you can see, this webinar today is sponsored by Intertek. Intertek is busy with a number of webinars, and all of this is for free, and it's for you guys to make sure that you are getting excited with us for their events that they are hosting in September. And we really would want all of you to make sure that you will not miss this event in September. It's a live event. The information and everything will shortly be available on a microsite. And everybody that's attending today will get a link to the microsite to make sure that you can register to attend this event in September. So like I said, it's Intertek, and the topic that we will be discussing today is food fraud. And I am so happy to introduce you to our speaker for today. Some of you may have seen her before. She's most probably come to your premises to do your audit. So Rika, thank you so much for being with us today and presenting on this very interesting topic, but very challenging topic, in the sense of that I'm sure that the people that's attending today may have had, challenges before. So Rika is the internal auditor, and she covers food safety management systems based on FSSC, ISO 22000, SANS 10330. She started her career in 1986. You will never say it, Rika, you look much younger than saying that you've been in the industry for that long. And she loves working with people. But I know Rika is a person that her passion is to make sure that people understand why they need to do things. And you can read her CV and her introduction further on the slide. But I think the best is for Rika to start this presentation so that you can see how knowledgeable she is and that she can provide you with very interesting and very informative information that she's got in her presentation. So Rika, I am looking forward to listening to your presentation. And okay, so it must just give me the opportunity. B, can you see? Sorry guys, it seems like I've got a challenge with my connection. Bridget, can you see if you can make Rika the presenter, please?
There we are.
Okay, Rika, it seems you're all good to go.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I think I've heard some names that I know and others that I might not know. Thanks for attending. Thanks for making time. I know everybody is stressed and time is valuable. So I hope I give you enough of a carrot to join me on further trainings and webinars so that we can get to the bottom of food fraud. I've heard names on this, what Adele mentioned earlier, who's definitely very well knowledgeable on matters already. Food fraud. Before we go on to the next slide, I just want to put something in our midst. Food fraud is about brand protection. Most of us perhaps know about the Ferrero Rocher recall at the moment with the Wonka bars. It's out there, a perfect match, and we don't know from which factory it's coming. So in March 2020, we said the situation calls for extraordinary response, no half measures. With the start of lockdown, we expected all a higher incidence of food fraud incidents. And we realize at the same time, there is some good news and there are some bad news. Fortunately, nothing lasts forever. So at Intertek, I will just quickly introduce you to Intertek for those that don't know Intertek. Intertek is a worldwide organization. They have about 3,000 auditors, 44,000 employees. They're a global market leader in the insurance, and they perform about 100,000 audits an annum. I was fortunate enough to take part in some of the audits internationally, and it was quite a great pleasure to work with all my colleagues around the globe. Our purpose is to bring quality, safety, and sustainability to life. I think I must take a sip of water. And besides food, there's quality management systems, ISO 14,000 certification activities, and the likes. And I would motivate you to contact Intertek if you have anything similar a need. You can do it through LinkedIn, and that might be the quickest way to contact them. So we're looking at global technical expertise, local resources, full breadth of services like supplier assessments, which I was involved before, and then innovative technology on platforms. So it's more than just auditing. Food fraud. Food fraud is where people sell things under the wrong pretensions. I think that's the short of it. Professor Chris Elliott, you can go and find him on Twitter. He will be able to give you a gist of everything. He said, this situation calls for extraordinary response, no half measures. He said, look out for what might happen. There will be an increase. Coming back to what Bridget says, we don't know what's the size of this industry, and it's enormous. The industry, that $50 billion is an estimate. It's really an estimate. It's enormous. We don't know how big it is, and we don't know where it is. I'm just thinking aloud now. I want to refrain from examples in South Africa for good reasons. But if I think the number of animals that find their way into auctions after being obtained through illegal sources, that is quite a number I've worked with, which is quite high. If I think of a product that was perhaps stolen from trucks and the likes, I do believe there's avos on the market at the moment, packed in a warehouse that was obtained through illegal sources. Some of the bigger farmers say they lose easy 35 tons of avos a night due to theft, and that found their way into operations. That is part of food fraud, because we don't know where it's coming from. We don't know what is the outcome of that. We don't know how good that is. Food fraud is not new. The adulteration of wine was since the beginning of ages there. Colorants was added, and then people, I think it was natural colorants at that point in time, but it was to give an impression of a certain grape that was used. So from the start, that was quite an issue, that wine was adulterated. With the Industrial Revolution, another items come forward with baking bread on a big industrial scale. They've used colorants, they've used bleaches, a number of them not food safe or food grade, to bake bread. So this is not something new we're working with at the moment. There's a number of cases of adulteration known to us. If you think of the Spanish olive oil, there was some illegal adulteration with oils not fit for human consumption. All of us know about the melamine in the Chinese products, which actually find their way right through into a number of other cases. And I think it was so embedded in that industry that even the beheading of the lady that came up with the idea did not help a lot. Peanut butter, selling a product that you know it's not fit for human consumption. That's adulteration. Sprung to mind, there was a Cadbury's chocolate incident in the UK, where they also sell Cadbury's chocolates adulterated unintentionally with salmonella. But it was a board decision to actually sell that and then try to solve the problem internal. Irish beef that was not beef. Interesting enough, in the start of the summer in Europe, the court case started with a syndicate. In the EU, they were purchasing old horses under the pretensions that these horses will get a good old age. The horses were transferred into Belgium, slaughtered and sold as beef. It's not so unique. Find us had it a couple of years ago. And in South Africa, there was also an incident where buffalo meat was labeled as beef. So food fraud is alive and well and kicking and making us thinking that we make the industry work. Facts, very well-known organization. I sit at their feet and learn from them. They reported December 2020 to March 2021, the highest levels of food fraud on illegal importation. It sprung to mind a couple of years ago, eggs were coming over the border from Mozambique. Illegal, no checks, no balances, causing a salmonella outbreak in the northern parts of KZN. So the product was clearly not safe. Elderberries, that was not really elderberries. Milk still replaced with water when we think we just close all the gates on that one. Mislabeling of fish. I know Facts did a couple of years work ago and say in the Cape Town restaurants, 62% of the fish that the patrons have ordered was not the species promised. Grapes and pistachios, that was not organic but sold as organic. I think organic is the most misused word in terms of promises. Adulterated honey, and that's on the scene forever now. A couple of years ago, there was about six containers returned from the US, 6 boats of containers returned from the US with adulterated honey and falsified nutritional labeling. Who will know? That's so. Sometimes we ask the question, who will know that the nutritional labeling is not accurate? So food fraud is a collective term encompassing the intentional substitution. So that's very important that we must remember this is not something that's planned. No, this is not something that we just sit and think, what shall we do today? They definitely do that to make sure that they have more monies in their pockets. Substitution, addition, tampering, or misrepresentation of food, feed, ingredients, packaging, labeling, product information, or false or misleading statements made about a product for economic gain that could impact consumer health. That is quite a term, eh? So anything that we do or our suppliers do that is not fully compliant with what we promised or what regulations require from us can go through as food fraud. There we have some examples. Substitution. So we add a bit of allspice to the black peppercorns. Concealment. We add some mineral oil to sunflower oil to make it a bit cheaper. Mislabeling. Expiry dates being then changed, for example. Grey market products, where we sell excess product for a specific consumer without that customer's knowledge. Or perhaps theft. Unapproved enhancements. We talked about the melamine, but the Sudan red is also one that sprung to mind here. Counterfeiting. Wonka. But in South Africa, we discovered a Valpray bottling plant just south of Johannesburg a couple of years ago. Perfect example. It looks like the original. It was filled from a fire hose and then watered down. We said milk is still one. Olive oil, expensive olive oil, is watered down. If you want to know more about this, there's an EU monthly newsletter. You can go and Google Food Fraud EU and you can sign up for the monthly newsletter. And that can tell you a lot of what has happened in the past month. So the top food fraud risks at the moment is still olive oil, the demand and the price, values substitution in that case, fish. There's a price label to certain species, and who will know the difference between hake and kingklip if you're not a pro? Organic food, was it really organic grown? Milk, the origin, the type, dilutions, grains, honey, and we can talk about honey till the end of days, coffee and tea. The origin, in a number of cases, is incorrectly declared. Spices, there we get some dilution, for lack of a better word, where they add a different component to the spice. Or saffron, there was now a case that gardenia, a different harvest method, different taste profile than saffron, was exported from China to different countries as saffron. Wine, origin mostly, the problem there, and then certain fruit juices. They declare a certain fruit juice to be 100% of a certain fruit, and they actually add something else. So in this case, we as an organization have to make sure that we walk the straight and narrow here. It's sometimes very difficult. We're in difficult economic times and we are working with difficult suppliers all over the globe. What is recommended for you as a company? To appoint a team. That team must know something about food safety. They must also work with authority. If it's only people that don't have any authority in the company, they won't make a way. And they must know what food fraud is. And they must know how to keep abreast of it. Another recommendation is go onto Twitter. Prof. Chris Elliott is there. I follow him religiously. And there's definitely good clues on what's happening and what is wrong and where we can have a look at it. Another surname, if you find Speaks, follow him. He's on the starter of the food fraud stuff on the FDA, and he's definitely somebody to learn from. Then we need a procedure and a methodology. Somewhere we need to put down how are we going to assess food fraud? How are we going to make sure that we, as well as our suppliers, as well as our customers, do the right thing? And a methodology. In a number of cases, we can find methodologies on the internet. The S-Safe tool is quite well known. You can Google S-Safe. If you have problems with that, welcome to contact me. That was developed by the Michigan State University, Van Wageningen Universiteiten, and PricewaterhouseCoopers, who funded the matter. There's others as well. I'm pretty sure if you go and just make sure it's a reputable tool, it can be used to identify possible food fraud incidents in your organization. Then one have to do a vulnerability assessment. In that assessment, one will sit and think of what is the vulnerabilities. Now, the challenge here is now we have to start thinking like a criminal now. We really have to start thinking of what can go wrong. Where can we go wrong in this? Who can try to make more money out of our company to make sure that we have addressed all those issues? What is nice of the SAFE tool, there's specific questions to be answered. So in a number of cases, you don't have to think of the possible scenarios that might take place. It gives you the scenarios. Then once we've done the assessment, we have to come up with control measures and mitigation plans. I am hesitant to say supplier assessment is the only control measure. There might be others. Think, how can we know what is happening out there, and to make sure that what's happening out there is not influencing the brand integrity of our company? Think of what's happening with Ferrero Rocher chocolates at the moment. Their sales went rock bottom. I don't think we would like to have that in our company. Also think of mitigation plans. Think of where can we try to intervene possibilities. If we buy honey, how are we going to make sure it's pure honey? The latest research was published last week on detection methods. And it's a troublesome one, because for every solution we get in detection methods, there's another way for crime. For example, in honey we test for the plant origin, C4, C3 plants. But if they add rice sugars to that, it's difficult to detect. Incident management procedures is then required. We have to put that into our food safety management system. It must be preventative. The sentence that it never happened with us, we don't know about that. We trust our suppliers. It's not going down well here. Because somewhere along the line, somebody might just trust somebody too much and we end up with a problem. It must be preventative. This is like your car insurance. You pay it monthly, not with the hope that they steal your car. So go into the methods, see how deep you can go into it, and see how effective you can do that. And then we have to land up with detection and testing methods where needed. DNA can be easily tested for imported beef, which might not be beef. We don't know that beef might come from Belgium. There can be other sophisticated laboratory test methods. That is expensive. So the first price will be to prevent all of that, rather than buy from somebody that you are sure. We have to implement that, and to be able to handle situations, we need a good traceability system. Why traceability? Traceability assures transparency and accountability through the supply chain. That will prevent food fraud incidents. The GFSI requires of traders to know the factory or the origin of the product, not only the previous link in the chain. So in this case, traceability are very important because that will tell us where it came from. Is there a possibility of food fraud? Does the olive oil come from somewhere where olive oils are not known to be produced? Mind you, if you look at the EU list, olive oils from Italy is adulterated in a number of cases. So perhaps we must look at where we can buy from reliable sources in this case. So traceability asks for increased access of information about its withdrawal from the market. That's why we need traceability. We need to know where we can withdraw that product when it comes to light that it is adulterated. And in the same time, we want to prevent contaminated product to reach the consumer. When it's adulterated, it does not necessarily a food safety issue, but it can. Do we know? Do we know what mineral oils were added to the olive oil? Do we know what the quality of water was added to the milk? So it can have an impact, especially if the water was coming from a fire hose. So we use traceability to track the status information within the supply chain throughout the cycle of the product. That one that we bought, as well as that one that we sold. Status information consists of data such as where product is located, under which environmental conditions it was stored and transferred. So we would like to know where the product came from. Just something I think here about is that we also want to know where our product went to. Because somebody might adulterate it down the line. Somebody might change our date system on that, give it a bit of a longer life. Somebody might use our packaging to pack an inferior product. We must think about that. Traceability is a requirement of Regulation 638. I was quite surprised when Regulation 638 was published and promulgated in 2018 that everybody was confused about traceability. Because it is part of the Consumer Protection Act. That act requires recall, and without traceability you can't recall. So Regulation 638 asks of us that the best method must be available for the traceability system so that recalls can be actioned. And when we have a recall, the National Directorate of Food Control must be notified. It also asks of us that documentation for traceability reasons must be kept on file, retention, 6 months after the shelf life of the product. I'm just thinking of the rule that 3 years might be applied here. So think of what is really good for your product protection and your brand protection. So recall is where we have remedial correction. So food fraud incident calls for corrections and corrective actions. Our first port of call is to prevent people consuming the product. We're not sure if the product is safe. We don't know where the product is coming. The avos that was stolen, when was the last pesticide administered on that product? There's a number of things that we don't know. Also corrective action. If we land in that difficult situation, how are we going to prevent us having that incident again? So when the non-conformities occurs, we have to take control immediately. Something must be done so that we prevent that product to be sold, to be consumed. And then we have to review the non-conformity. Look at what possibly caused it. What can possibly went wrong in similar incidents within the company. And make sure that the changes to the food safety management system is done when necessary. Any questions?
Thank you, Rika. That was a very informative and decent presentation with plenty of examples. So currently, I cannot see that there's any questions that is coming from the audience. I assume it's because your presentation was so detailed. But something that I want to ask, Rika, is that, you know, many a times, I mean, you've done so many audits before, and what would you say is the major type of questions or challenges that people normally sit with when it comes to auditing the section of food fraud? What is the most general scenarios that you can share with the audience?
The first thing that I would like to share with the audience is we don't compile this assessment or the VASIP that everybody talked about. I don't like these acronyms, but we don't compile the vulnerability assessment for the sake of passing an audit. So if we have non-conformances on that, rather stand one step back and say, how can we protect our brand? And look at that. The second one that I found people having trouble with is finding a tool that works with them. Now, there's a couple of tools in South Africa that might work, and there's a couple international tools. And one have to look at what might work for you and might not work for you. But it must not be a way out to do a short assessment. It must be there to assess all possibilities of food fraud so that it can be prevented. I know all of us like to take shortcuts, perhaps me the most of all. But in this case, I think one must try to prevent shortcuts. The aim of the food fraud assessment, it's very important to pass the audit. I don't have a doubt about that. But the main aim of the food fraud assessment is to protect your brand. It is not a pleasant experience to find something on social media and you don't want to go that route. That is some costs that is impossible to calculate. One don't really know what it cost us if there's something on social media flying around, sometimes for years. So I think if we approach it from that point of view, instead of only trying to pass an audit, it might help a lot. Coming back to the audits, let me answer that part as well. The audits is definitely very important, and the audits are required to do business. So I would love to motivate you to look at all possible food fraud incidences. Keep yourself up to date of what's happening out there so that you can build that into your food safety system. It is difficult to read that lot, I know. So I would like to recommend you again on Twitter, connect with Prof. Chris Elliott. I'm learning a lot from him. Spinks is also there, Prof. Spinks. And then the EU list, which can land in your inbox without any effort, can teach you a lot as well. That way you can keep yourself up to date in short, quick communications without writing a PhD about that. Does that answer your question, Adele?
Yes, I surely think so, Rika. Thank you very much for that. While you were speaking, a number of questions has come in, and I'm sort of going to start at the top to make sure that we don't miss out any of it. So we've got a question from Tandu, and she's saying, how can one prevent food fraud on organic products?
Tandu, that's one of the more difficult ones, and I have sympathies with it. In South Africa, we have organic certifications done by certification bodies, and I would recommend you to look at people that are certified. If they're not certified and you want to purchase organic vegetables, I would recommend a supplier assessment on site to see if they have organic systems in place. One of the problems, for example, with organic, they must use a sterilized manure. And if it's not sterilized manure is quite expensive. If it's not sterilized, there's the hazard of pathogenic organisms and things like that. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, I know that we don't want to keep the audience too long, so there's another 5 questions. So the next question is from Yaku, and Yaku is saying, suppliers often say that the manufacturer is confidential. How can we get around this, or should we look for a different supplier in this case?
The reason why they normally say that, they're afraid that you might skip them and buy directly from the supplier. Perhaps if one can put a confidentiality agreement or something similar in place and promise not to do that, it might help. Otherwise, look for another supplier.
Yes, next. I also think so, and I think that's also, I know people often struggle to get the certificate of analysis from their supplier or the certificate of origin from the supplier. But I think through your presentation today, it is so important that everybody that's online realize how important this relationship is between yourself and suppliers to make sure. So if you are dealing with a supplier and they're not providing you with everything, I think the umbrella over everything is, like you said, Rika, brand protection. You know, is price really going to drive you that far to keep on accepting their excuses, or is it better to make sure that you deal with suppliers that you can trust and that can provide you with the information? Rika, here's another interesting question from Daniel, and he says, is there a relationship between food fraud and food defense? And how do you differentiate between the two in the available tools used to perform the assessments?
I would like to define the two as 2 different activities. Food fraud is where definitely somebody planned the adulteration to make more money. Food defense is where somebody have a grudge against the company, against the activities at the company, and they would like to sabotage the product, which is actually from an ethical, moral point of view, which they would like to do that. So monies are not involved there. My recommendation is do 2 different assessments. Because it's different motivations, it will ask for different control measures. There's definitely food defense tools also available. And if you attend my training here at Intertek, we can introduce you to those tools.
Brilliant. Okay, I think the next question from Annery is specific also in terms of the relationship with suppliers. He says that what we find is that agents and suppliers don't inform us when they buy from a different manufacturer. People are also very protective of their supplier list and don't always want to share because of their fear that you might buy direct from their manufacturer or suppliers. Yeah, I think that's a challenge that once again breaks down to what relationships do you have with your clients, and at the end of the day, it's your choice, and then to weigh up. You know, are you going to stick with their excuses and feel that you are protected, or are you going to look for different suppliers? Rika, there's another question here for you, and it is from Alston, and she's asking, what about mycotoxin testing in case of peanut butter? Isotope testing for all origins? How would we go about testing if something like horse meat has been mixed with other meats? Sure, so that's quite a big question, but I think this comes down to your relationship with your laboratories and making sure that they give you guidance. What would you say, Rika?
I've heard about the peanuts and the beef in this question. If there's more after my answer, just help me out. The beef, you can do DNA testing. It's not the cheapest way, but I don't know of any food fraud testing or analytical methods that's cheap. So it will be better to have a good relationship with your supplier. But like risks and opportunities to all, if you want to import, there's an opportunity you can get more at a lower price, then you must just perhaps build in the analytical DNA testing into that costing to make sure that you're doing the right thing. The peanut butter, mycotoxin testing, it's available. It can be done. That's fairly cheap. It's not so difficult to do that. Did that answer the question?
Yes, I think so. There's one more question that I'm going to ask. And then the other questions that we have not answered, we will make sure that we get these questions to Rika so that she can provide you with an answer. So the last question is from Jana. And Jana is asking, will it be considered as food fraud when you extend the expiry date of an ingredient, for example, a spice, and use it? Product still falls in spec.
I want to answer this question in two ways. In a number of cases, we in the industry get confused with expiry dates and best before dates. If we look at Regulation 146, the definitions for sell-by and best before dates are not expiry dates. It's still fit for human consumption thereafter. So if you have a good method, scientifically based, to extend life from like a best before date, no problem. If it's an expiry date, stand back and say, why is there an expiry date? And make sure that if you lengthen that life, it's based on the reasons for why there's an expiry date, and that you can answer that from a scientific point of view. But the moment that one might think of just extending the life to be able to sell it, irrespective of outcomes of testing, it's food fraud.
Definitely. Rika, thank you so much for your clear answers. I think there's one more request here from Megan. She's asking if you can please share, if you've got it, and if you don't have it, we can send it to Megan afterwards, the Twitter handle for Prof. Chris Everett. She said she was trying to get hold of it and she can't find it. Do you know it, Rika, or can we send it to Megan afterwards?
Megan, I'll gladly send it afterwards because I've put all my devices off which might interfere, and I still did not manage to do the slideshow perfectly. So I'll gladly send that. If other people also would like to have that, make contact with me via Adele and I'll gladly send that on.
Oh, Rika, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge. And I'm sure that everybody that was online did definitely learn something today. And if it's only in terms of being aware that you have Intertek training on food fraud and that you will be able to assist them with all the questions, that's also good. So I think from my side, the takes is that slide that you had where you said that it's so important to have a team, to make sure your team that you've got to help you with your assessments is knowledgeable. And in this case, we're talking about the relationship with the suppliers as well as with your laboratory. And then also the documentation that you spoke about, and then the vulnerability assessment and all the different tools that you mentioned there, and your control measures to mitigate should something go wrong, and the detection part, and also then afterwards making sure that whatever the findings were that you got, that you implement the correct corrective actions. But I want to say thank you to everybody for their time, for signing in, and for Intertek and Rika, to you for the presentation. And remember, there's going to be another webinar for the next month. The topic has not yet been decided. but please make sure to watch out for the Food Focus newsletter, because we will definitely inform you in the newsletter about the next topic. And then we are looking forward for you all to attend the Intertek event in September. And like I said, keep your eyes open. And if you are not signed up for our newsletter, please make sure to go to our website, www.foodfocus.co.za, and then sign up for our newsletter to make sure you don't miss out on any news on the Intertek event in September. I want to say thank you and have a blessed day and keep well. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you from my side as well. Thanks.
Okie dokes. Bye.